AB Advanced Decoder has been created to work in 3 different modes. You have spot mode, in which you are going to be using the beams of audio to isolate specific acoustic beams from the ambisonic signal. You have speaker mode, in which you are going to decode the ambisonic signal to different speaker arrays. And then you have auto mode, which is going to be the plugin in automatic mode, which is going to be steering the focus towards where the sound is coming from. In this video, we're going to explore the spot mode, in which you are going to be able to create spots of audio for your mixes. My name is Alejandro, and we are the Audio Brewers. In spot mode, AB Advanced Decoder will be a very powerful beamformer, which is going to support up to 64 independent beams. Each beam can be placed anywhere in your acoustic sphere. Each beam can have its own size, its own radius, its own height, and each beam can have its own filters, high pass and low pass filter, its own volume, and like that you can pull spots of audio from your 3-dimensional signal and create really custom mixes of whatever has been recorded from one Ambisonics microphone. Let's explore how the spot mode works by opening a very simple project in the DAW. So I have here a very basic project here. I have a 3-dimensional third order Ambisonics recording, and I have here one instance of AB Advanced Decoder. So if I press play, you can hear what type of recording this is. Now, let me just explain you what I have here and what we're going to do here. I have a third order Ambisonics recording of an orchestra, and I have it inserted in a track of 16 channels, which is a track for an third order Ambisonics recording. Right now, I have just loaded one instance of AB Advanced Decoder, and right now it's working in stereo mode, in speakers mode. So you are hearing a stereo decoding signal of whatever was going on in the third order Ambisonics recording, right? So I'm going to switch to acoustic spots mode so that I can explore how I can make beams with it, and I'm going to show you everything that the plugin can do in acoustic spots mode. So as soon as I click on the acoustic spots button, you will see that instead of having 2 speakers, now you have 2 spots, right? And you have controls over each of the 2 spots. So you have here the radius of the spot and its height. So you can literally customize the size of each spot. Right now I'm in spot 1, and if I go to spot 2, you can see that now I have selected spot 2, and I can do the same. I can control its size. And I also can control where this spot is. I can either move it around the 3-dimensional projection, or I can write its azimuth and elevation independently. For example, 80 and I don't know, 45, something like that. And like that, you can place your spots anywhere around the listener. So this is a third order Ambisonics recording, meaning that I have inserted it in a 16 channel track. Meaning that right now I could create up to 16 spots, right? If I wanted to create more than 16 spots, I will have to make this track wider, of course, because I need more outputs. Each spot is going to go to one specific output. So if I expand the width of this track to, say, 64, I will be able to switch from up to 16 spots to up to 32 spots, or even 64 spots. Like that, I can create up to 64 spots of audio. The fact that I have these selected here, it doesn't mean that I have enabled 64 spots. Right now, I have only enabled 2 spots, right? And if I wanted to enable more spots, all I have to do is go to the spots and just set it to be on. And you see now that the spot exists here. And again, I have the controls over this spot. And like that, I can add different spots of audio, and each spot is gonna go to one of the outputs of the track, right? So 64 channel track, 64 spots, and each spot goes to one of the 64 outputs of this track. So let's go back to 16. Now I have set this track to be 16 again. I can still see that it could have up to 32 or up to 64 channels. However, you can see that if I go to the channel 17, it says not available. That is because this track only has a width of 16 channels. So there is no 17 channel. If I wanted to use the spot number 17, I will have to expand this track to be a 64 channel track. And like that, you can more or less create the width of your track depending on how many spots you want to create. However, you always have a minimum width of whatever the recording is. In this case, a third order Ambisonics recording, so it has to be at least 16 channel wide. So right now I have created 4 spots. They are all on. However, because this is a stereo video, you can only hear spots 1 and 2. If you were in, I don't know, in your DAW, you will be able to hear the other spots in the other outputs, but because YouTube only supports 2 channels, you will only be able to hear 2 spots. So I'm just going to disable these 2 spots, and we're going to stick to 2 spots here. So let me just set this to 16 channel. This is just so that it can be more comfortable. The buttons are bigger, right? So now I have 2 spots, a spot number 1 and spot number 2, and they are turned on. So I can control each of these spots' position, as I have described before, but I also have some other types of control. Let me just show you. I'm going to, right now, disable spot number 2, and I'm going to start by showing you how a spot behaves when it is as narrow as possible and how it behaves if I make it bigger, right? So if I press play with a narrow spot, you can see that right now I was focusing on the male voice. So whenever he wasn't singing or he was not singing that loud, you cannot hear him and you can really hear the other voices in the back. But if I make this spot wider, you just have more things that are being gathered in this spot. Let me just put this recording in another place where we have more action happening. And so like that, if your spot is bigger, it's gonna grab more information, and if it's smaller, you will be able to focus this spot in a specific place. Along with the radius, you also have a height control so that you can make a spot taller without increasing its radius. So it can be just taller but not wider. In case you have like sounds that are adjacent vertically, so you want to grab them, but you don't want to actually grab something from the sides. And like that, each spot can be customized independently. So if I have 2 spots, I can make spot number 2, for example, to be bigger. Let's just say that I want spot number 2 to focus on the back, which is going to be the people clapping. And spot 1, I wanted to focus, I don't know, in the strings. They were around here, if I remember correctly. Let me check. Okay, so you see that now I have focused spot number 1 to the strings. So you can hear the strings on your left ear because it's spot number 1. And in the right ear, you cannot hear pretty much anything. You can hear the reverberation because the spot 2 is focused on whatever is happening in the back. So if I go to the end of this recording where people are clapping from the arena, you're gonna hear that spot 2 has all the information on people clapping. And so like that, you can create your own mix, grabbing different spots from one recording. What I usually do when I'm mixing something is like, I create several spots and then I send these spots to auxiliary tracks, to mono auxiliary tracks, and then I treat these spots as if they were spot microphones to reinforce whatever I'm mixing. I'm gonna show you that in a while. So basically, this is what the spots are. Each of the spots is using our newest beamforming algorithm, and so they are very precise if you are making them narrow, and if you're making them wider or even taller, they are grabbing more information of whatever is going on, right? So, as I was telling you before, each spot has more controls than this. You can also solo a spot, or you can mute it. And like that, you can monitor whatever your spot is doing. And you can even increase the volume of one of the spots. And like that, each spot is pretty much like one mono channel. You have the control of its mix and you can do whatever you want. So another thing that I'm doing here is I have enabled my upscaler, meaning that right now everything I was showing you was in 7th order. Even though this recording is in 3rd order, if you enable the upscaler, it doesn't matter in which DAW you are, you're always going to be working in 7th order. The plugin is upscaling the signal using our upscaling algorithm to 7th order internally, and then from there, it's grabbing all the information. So let me just show you how different it sounds. Let's just say that I have here one spot, and I'm just going to focus on a voice. Let me just get out of this voice. Okay, so now I'm focusing somewhere else, and if I turn off this upscaler, you can see that now you hear the voice louder because it's less defined, because it's the original signal is in 3rd order. And if I enable the upscaler, you will see that the contrast between where the voice is coming from and where the voice is not coming from is much larger. Check it out. You see that as soon as I enable the upscaler, the signal becomes much more defined, so you can get rid of whatever is off axis of the spot much more easier. This is a really cool thing because you can always work in 7th order, even if you're in DAWs that don't support 7th order, such as Logic or I don't know, like Nuendo 14 that supports up to 4th order. So you can have your lower order ambisonic signal, upscale them, and then just grab spots from there, right? Another thing that you have in each of the spots independently is low pass and high pass filters. So you can focus on a place and then you can control the pass of the signal. Or you can low pass it. And like that, you can, for example, enable another spot. And like that, you can grab different spots with different frequency ranges, and you can just go really creative with whatever you want to do. So this is really useful, for example, if you want to send a spot to, for example, an LFE channel where you want to pass whatever is below 120 Hertz and you want just to skip whatever is above, or if you want to work with the height speakers, if you want to put stuff above your head. I personally always cut whatever is on the bass because above the head really works well when you're doing with the high frequencies or mid to high frequencies. So the pass filters are really useful whenever you want to do like immersive mixes and you really want to manipulate how the person is listening to your signal in an immersive environment, right? So besides these passes, you also have a gate. This gate is really useful for filtering whatever is below a threshold. I call it a spatial gate because whatever is outside a threshold, it doesn't matter where it is in the three-dimensional signal, is going to be filtered out. Let me just disable this spot and just go back to spot number 1. So say that you have this spot here. Let me just set this back to the original. And if I enable the gate, you have two controls. You have the range and then you have the lag. So the sound is the tolerance, meaning that if I have this spot here, but for example, say that the loudest part of your ambisonic signal is happening here, this spot is just going to be muted because it's outside of the gate's range. So if I increase the range, it's going to become more tolerant and it's going to allow more things to pass. These passes happen immediately when they come in the signal, but when they get out of the signal, there is a lag so that you can just fade out whatever is outside the gate. So let's just check it out. So you have the voice happening somewhere here. So let's say that I put the spot here. So if I press play, theoretically, I shouldn't hear anything. You can see that I don't hear anything, and that is because the sound is here and my spot is here and I have like 0 tolerance. But if I increase the range, I can hear more and more. This is a great way to filter stuff out of your spot. So you can put a spot somewhere and just make sure that if this spot is 100% not what you want to get, just mute it, you know? It's a really, really useful thing. Okay, and finally, besides the gain, you have a gain control, which is going to give you an overall gain of whatever your output signal is. This is all the spots together, whereas this is per spot. And then you have your zero latency monitoring in case you want to work in zero latency. Just mind that if you work in zero latency, the whole process is going to happen in your audio thread. So if you have multiple plugins or multiple instances of AB Advanced Decoder, it could be a little bit heavy on your CPU. And then you have your CPU mode, which is ultra mode or light mode. In light mode, is going to be a little bit more relaxed. The upscaler is not going to work, and the beamforming algorithm is going to be more relaxed on the CPU. So if you have an older system, it's really useful to put it in light mode. But if you have a newer system, ultra mode is the way to go. This is how the acoustic spots are. Now I'm going to show you how I can use them in a real life example. Check it out. So I have made an experiment here recording a drum set using 2 microphones. Why did I use 2 microphones and not 1? Well, because the Ambisonics microphone is above the drummer, so the kick drum was way too far away from the Ambisonics microphone, so I had to use a dynamic microphone in the kick. So I'm using 1 microphone for the kick, and then 1 Ambisonics microphone for the whole rest of the drum set. This is by no means the way you should be recording drums. However, as an experiment, it really, really worked. And it sounds really, really well for being a 2 microphone recording, and has been mixed in Dolby Atmos in a 9.1.6 object. So it's like incredibly spatial, the feeling. Right now you're gonna be listening to a stereo mix of whatever I mixed. However, in the link below you will be able to find a link to the Dolby Atmos mix so that you can hear it in your Dolby Atmos rig. So let's explore what I did here, because it is really complex and it is really, really experimental. What I did in short was recorded with the Ambisonics microphone, and then from the Ambisonics microphone I grabbed 1 beam of each of the drum sets so that I could use it as if it were a spot microphone, so that I could mix it using only stock plugins, and then I could put it back into an immersive object that was then rendered into a Dolby Atmos mix. Let's go to the DAW and check out exactly how this works. So you can see right now that here I only have 3 audio files, and out of these 3 audio files, this is duplicated because this is my kick. I used it twice. And then this is my Ambisonic signal. You can see here that my Ambisonic signal is not going anywhere. It's not being routed anywhere. However, I'm definitely using the transcoder so that I can convert this signal to B format. And then I'm using the rotator so that I can more or less have the snare in the front center, so that it's a little bit easier for me to place each of the drum pieces. However, it's not necessary to use the rotator, but I definitely did it just to have a more clear image of how this works. And finally, I did a ton of sends. Each send is going to a specific track, which is then being treated as if it was a spot microphone. So I have the snare, I have the rack tom, I have the floor tom, I have the hi-hat, the crash, the ride, and then I have a couple more sends. These are the overheads, which is a 916 send, you will see, and then this is the whole drum set. So basically what I'm doing is I am putting the whole drum set in a 916 mix, and then I'm using each of these sends as a mono spot just to reinforce where each of the drum's parts are. And it works really well. Then everything is going to my 916 object, and then from this object I'm sending the mix to my Dolby Atmos renderer, which is here. And from the Dolby Atmos renderer, you can right now hear a stereo mix because this is YouTube, there is no Dolby Atmos. However, you can see that the drums is not on the bed, is mixed as spot microphone. So if I press play, and so forth. This is my drums. They're mixed in Dolby Atmos using just a couple of microphones. Let's explore what I did. So, as I explained you before, the first thing I did was send my drums to a 916 track, which is called drums, which is this. And this track has just a rotator, just so that I can place the drums in a way where the snare is right in the front center, right? Then, well, I have visualizer just to make sure that this is what happens. And then I have a couple of stock plugins just to be able just to tame the frequencies a little bit and the compressor and everything. So if I solo this, you will see that now you have a three-dimensional image of the drums overall. Check it out. I'm just gonna put it from somewhere in the middle. You can hear that the kick is not very loud, and that is because the Ambisonics microphone is quite far away, and this is why I had to capture the kick with a dynamic microphone. And so, just like I told you, I sent this Ambisonics signal into a new Ambisonics track, and then this track, I am sending it to a 916 track, and I am using our AB Advanced Decoder just to decode to a 916 layout. So these drums are being decoded to 916, and then they are being sent to the object. There's pretty much nothing else going on. As I told you, just stock plugins, and then in the object itself, I just have some equalizers and a compressor for the end, right? This is pretty much the main body of the drums. They sound three-dimensional already. If you hear it in 916, you can hear that the ride is pretty much here, that the snare is centered, and then the hi-hat is a little bit to the left. However, I want to reinforce everything so that it sounds even more spatial. And this is why I am sending my signal to mono tracks. So let's just explore these mono tracks. First of all, I have the snare. This is my snare here. And from my Ambisonics signal, I am sending my track to an Ambisonics track, which is going to be for the snare. So I just have an equalizer here and then a decoder. And the decoder is pointing where the snare is being captured the loudest. So if I solo this track, and I press play, you can hear that you are only grabbing the snare, and that is because I'm using my spatial gate, and I'm making sure that whatever is outside of this spot is ignored completely, right? So I'm pretty much filtering whatever is outside of the spot so that I make sure that I just grab the snare. And then I'm using a little bit of a high pass just to get rid of whatever is on the low end, and a little bit of a low pass to get rid of the cymbals a little bit. So like this, I am grabbing my mono snare signal, and then I'm sending this to a mono track. And this is the mono track, and then here I have my snare. And in my snare, I'm just applying a little bit more of EQ. I'm placing it somewhere in my three-dimensional mix, and then I'm sending that to the object that I had created. So pretty much my object right now contains the three-dimensional Ambisonics 916 conversion of the whole drum set, plus my snare in the middle. So if you check it out, how it sounds together. And if I remove the snare, you can see that you can still hear the snare, but there is more definition if I add the mono spot of the snare to this mix. And just like that, I have done the rest. If we go to another example, for example, let's just say that we go to the ride. I am sending my Ambisonics signal to an Ambisonics track, which is going to only contain the ride. There is nothing going on here. And if you open here, you can see that my decoder is just grabbing a big spot here. So if I solo this track, you can hear that you're now only listening to the ride, right? So here you have the ride. The spot has been created with a specific size that was comfortable for me to be able to get rid of the other things. Again, I'm using a high pass so as to get rid of whatever is below the frequency that I am interested in. And then I am also using this gate so as to completely get rid of whatever is outside of this spot. And like that, I can grab my ride and I can send it to a mono track, which is going to contain my ride. And then this is the track that I am working with, which is going to have an equalizer and it's going to have a compressor. And then this track, I'm sending it again to my drum object. So like that, I am building a lot of mono spot tracks, and I'm sending them and I'm summing them in my drums object. And I'm building my drums object just from the signal of one microphone. So if you listen to the drums plus the right, and if I remove the right, so again, you can hear the right perfectly fine. However, if you add this mono right, it's going to be more defined in the three-dimensional acoustic field of my Dolby Atmos mix, right? And the same I'm doing with something, for example, let's just say that we're gonna go to the crash. Let's just go to the crash and let's just check it out. The same thing I'm doing. I'm sending my signal to an Ambisonics track, which is going to contain my crash. And then if you check my crash, which is here, there's nothing going on, and I am inserting my decoder and I am grabbing just this part, which is where the crash is sounding. And again, I'm using a high pass and I'm using my gate so as to be able to just grab the crash. And if I solo this track, let me just solo it. You can see that the sound only comes whenever the crash sounds, right? And just like that, I'm grabbing the spot of the crash and I am mixing the crash independently, and then I'm summing it to my three-dimensional drums. And like that, I'm building my three-dimensional drum set. And if you listen to this in a Dolby Atmos rig, you will be hearing as if you were sitting right on the drums. You will hear the hi-hat there, you will hear the snare here, and you will hear the right here. It's amazing, the feeling. Finally, I'm doing an extra 916 track, which is the overheads, which is the following. I'm sending, again, my Ambisonics signal to a track, but this time this track is a 916 track, and I am exporting it to a 916 track. However, this time I am lowering the volume of every single channel except the high channels, so that I can give more definition to whatever is happening above my head. And then I'm using an equalizer and a compressor just to make sure to increase a little bit the color of the high frequency sound. So if I solo this track, you can see that you can only hear the cymbals, and because the cymbals are heard above my head, I am just giving more definition to whatever is happening above my head, and I'm mixing that along with the whole drums so that it has a little bit more of life above the listener. So like that, I'm creating a whole Dolby Atmos mix with two microphones. It's quite amazing. It sounds really good. You can listen to the mix in the link in the description below. But wait a minute, two microphones, maybe that's too much. Maybe you want it to be more extreme. What about one microphone? What happens if I wanted to mix something in Dolby Atmos using just one microphone? Well, let's check it out. Let's check out what I did here. I have a jazz trio here that I have recorded in the studio, and I have mixed it in Dolby Atmos using one microphone. There is no DI boxes, there is no extra microphones, there's nothing extra. It's just one Ambisonics microphone. So if you check on how this sounds in stereo, I have to downmix it to stereo because YouTube. However, you can listen to the whole Dolby Atmos mix in the link in the description below. So this is a jazz trio that I have recorded with one Ambisonics microphone. That's it. And I have mixed it in Dolby Atmos. You can hear the mix and it is really, really immersive. You can really, really feel as if you were there. However, this is not a straight Ambisonics mix because I wanted to create a Dolby Atmos mix and I wanted to record something that sounds like really mixed music. And in music that has been mixed in a studio, the bass has to be in the front center along with the kick and pretty much the drums. There is no way you can do that in live music because you cannot put the bass player on top of the drummer. So I achieved it in a very interesting manner. I'm gonna show you how I did it. But first, let's analyze what I have done here in this mix. As you can see, there is just one recording here. And then this wave, I am sending it to a bunch of places. I'm gonna show you what I did. Let's explore it. So first of all, what I did, of course, is to add the transcoder so that I convert the signal of this microphone to B format. And then I added the rotator so that I could have the drums in front of me. In this recording, however, the drums are right in front and the bass is right in the back of the drums. I did this on purpose because I wanted to be able to separate both signals for the mix. However, I joined them in this Dolby Atmos mix. How did I do it? Well, using our AB Imager upscaler. What I did here is to push the back of the signal to the front so that I could push the bass to the front so that it could be mixed with the drums as if they were in the same place. So you have the drums in front and then you have the bass on the back, but because I pushed it, now you have the bass in front. This is really amazing when it comes to the AB Imager upscaler because it allows you to push things so that they have less depth. And this is what I wanted. I want to have a little bit more less depth so that I could have the bass and the drums right there in the center, front center. So like that, I created my room mix, which is everything in the center, in the front center. The bass is in the front center and the drums are in the front center, more or less, you'll see. So this is going to my bed as a bed of audio, and then I reinforced this with objects of each of the instruments. Let's first explore how this bed sounds. Okay, so this is my bed, is the whole signal all together. I just use stock plugins here, aside from the Audio Brewers plugins. I used an equalizer, a compressor, and another equalizer just to make sure that the room sounds okay. However, this is not all I did. I created 3 objects here. I created one object for the bass, one object for the drums, and one object for the guitar. And I placed these objects more or less where they reside in my bed so that I can reinforce the sound of the bed, right? So let's start from the guitar. So the first thing I did here is send my Ambisonics signal to a new track, which is the guitar. And then I inserted the AB Advanced Decoder, and I used our beamforming algorithm to grab a couple of spots. I could have grabbed one spot, but if you grab one spot, then you have one mono guitar. So if you grab a couple of spots and just offset them just a little bit, it will create a sensation of stereophony. Check it out. If I solo this guitar and I press play, let me just go where the guitar plays, somewhere here. Okay, so now if I just had one spot for the guitar, let me just disable this spot. You can see that the guitar becomes mono. Whereas if I add this spot and I just offset it a little bit, you can get like a fake stereo signal of the guitar. And like that, I grabbed the signal of the guitar as a spot. And then this signal, I sent it to an object, which I placed where the guitar sounds in my bed, just to reinforce the sound of the bed. So I'm sending this guitar to the object of the guitar, and then I am mixing it again with stock plugins. I'm using a couple of equalizers, a couple of compressors, and then an extra equalizer. And then I'm sending this as an object to my Dolby Atmos renderer. You can see that the guitar is here. Because I have created 2 beams to create like a stereo sensation, I created a stereo object. And like that, it reinforced really well. So if I mix only the guitar with the room, and without the guitar. And check it out, the A-B. It sounds really, really different. The guitar really comes to life when you enable this object. And this is how I created my guitar. Now, let's go to the bass. The bass, I did the same. I sent one Ambisonic signal to one track here, which is called bass. And then I grabbed the bass from the original signal, which was on the back, remember, the way I told you? However, because in the bed, I have pushed this bass to the front, I am sending this bass to the front just to reinforce the bass from the bed. So if I solo this, and let's listen to it when the bass is playing. So the beamforming algorithm is really focusing really well on this bass and is really allowing me to have room to mix it really well. So I did exactly the same I did with the guitar here for the bass. I just grabbed two beams instead of one so that I could have a sensation of stereophony. If I had just one spot, it would sound like this. If I have two, it sounds a little bit more spread when you have two. And because this is an acoustic bass, I definitely want it to sound spread. This is not an electric bass where you have it right dead in the front center. It has to have a little bit of room. And this is how I did the bass. And I added again a couple of equalizers, compressors, and a multiband compressor just to make sure that it sounds really well and so that it sits really well in the mix. Now, I have sent this to an object that is going right in front, because remember, in the bed, I sent the bass from the back to the front. So now I'm reinforcing the bass that exists in the front, and I am spreading it 100% in the front as a wall of sound, right? So if you listen to it together with the room, and if I remove this bass, the difference is huge, right? So having a beamformer really allows me to cherry pick a specific place and mix it the way I want. Check it out, AB. The difference is huge. It really sounds much better. And finally, I did exactly the same with the drums. However, the drums are a bigger instrument, so I wanted them to sound much more immersive. And this is why I have created a 916 object for the drums. And in this 916 object, I have sent several things. Check it out. So again, I have my raw signal, and I'm sending to my drums, I'm sending it to 3 channels. I'm sending it to a drums channel, I'm sending it to a drums kick, where I try to steal the kick as much as I can, and then I am sending it to a body high, which you will see what it is. So first, let's go to the drums ambics, which is this. This is pretty much the drums overall sound. If I press play, here I try to grab the signal of the drums, the general signal of the drums in a stereo beam, right? And then I'm sending them to my 916 object, right? However, this is not immersive yet, so I have to make it immersive. How do I do it immersive? Well, I have to do something different here. I am also sending them to the body high, which is whatever is happening above the head. You can see that I have placed 4 spots of whatever this Ambisonics microphone was capturing on the ceiling of my studio so that I could grab the overheads of my recording. And I'm also using a high pass so that I only grab the cymbals. I just want to give emphasis to the cymbals above the listener's head. So if I solo this and play it, you can hear that here you have a lot of bright sound, and in a 714 Dolby Atmos room, you can hear everything happening above your head. Let me just go to a place where the drums are more intense. And then another thing that I did is I sent this to a quad track because I just wanted it to have the 4 spots of audio above the listener's head. So right now I have the drums in front of me as a stereo mix, and then I have the overheads as an immersive mix. So like that, I'm building my own immersive drums. If I mix both of them, like that, I am creating my own mix of the drums. Then I have another beam here, which is the kick, which is a very difficult thing that it was to grab the kick from the drums, right? For doing this, I tried to grab where the kick was coming from. And then I use the gate just to grab whatever is louder. So if I press play, you can hear that now I'm just grabbing whatever is on the bass side and whatever has transients. It's not 100% the kick, but it's the best I could do with one microphone. And I'm mixing that right in the front center because it's the kick. So I'm adding that to my drums object. And so if I mix that with whatever is happening above my head, this is what I get. And like that, I finally added the a final beam, which is a very high and very narrow quad beam, just because I wanted to create even a more high frequency overhead, just to emphasize whatever is happening above the listener. So if you solo the whole drum, everything was sent to one 916 object. It sounds really, really, really well. I am grabbing a whole mix of a drum, a whole mix of a double bass, and a whole mix of a guitar from one microphone. Everything using the Audio Brewers beamforming algorithm. I hope you find this useful. This is a creative idea, things you could do with one Ambisonics microphone. This is by no means the way you should approach a mix, but it's a very, very creative way of using our newest beamforming algorithm. If you have any questions or any comments, don't hesitate to leave them below. I'm really excited about this plugin. I hope that you find it useful. My name is Alejandro, and we are the Audio Brewers, and I will see you on the next one. Cheers.